Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 159 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here in the vomitorium with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David Noe. How are you feeling on this bright, almost fallish day out there?
It is a little bit
summer.
autumnal,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I'm feeling great, Jeff, actually.
Excellent.
I came from the doctor, and I am grateful to say that I am in good health.
Excellent.
So, Deo Laudes, there's nothing wrong with me that we know about, at least.
Fantastic.
So that's something to be very grateful for.
A clean bill.
That's correct.
Fantastic. That always feels good, yeah.
And the summer is almost over, but we're getting those fall hints of what they used to call Indian summer, which is so beautiful.
It is. It's really, really nice.
The low temperatures at night, perfect sleeping,
exactly.
And the nice sunshine during the day. How are you doing, Jeff?
Doing good. I love to see the leaves turning. And you can get some of those, hint of those bright fall colors to come. Yeah, it's one of the wonderful things about living here.
That's right.
In the Midwest, yeah.
And you're back in the classroom, back in the saddle,
yes.
Riding herd on those undergrads.
Yep.
Get along, little doggy. How's it going?
Good. I got full classes. I got some really, I mean, we're just a week and a half in, but it seems I have a lot of myth nerds coming in. They're armed with their Percy Jacksons. And
all right.
Just ready to roll. It's been
their
great.
Uncle Rick. So there is an extended family member of mine in your world religions class.
Really?
But this person doesn't want anybody to know.
Oh, including me?
I think so.
Oh, no.
So
really? I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't say anything.
I don't know. It came out during some family interaction, and so-and-so said, "Did you know that so-and-so is in Dr. Winkle's class?" And I said, "What? Dr. Winkle's class? No, I didn't know." And the person said, kind of trying to keep it kind of, on the hush-hush.
Right.
And then the person said, but Dr. Winkle is the greatest professor.
Oh, fantastic.
To which I immediately took umbrage, right? I'm standing right here. What do you mean? And then this person whose identity shall remain hidden said, well, I mean, present company excluded. I've never had a class with you. And I said, with that attitude, you won't either.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. I hope you shut it down.
I did. Yes. That's right. So, Jeff, you have a great reputation as a professor.
Excellent. Well, now it's going to be a weird guessing game. Who's the Noe adjacent in the room?
I think the person may listen to the podcast, which is probably why they didn't want to be identified.
I got you. Okay.
So I have semi-outed them, I guess you could say.
Fair enough. We can leave it at that.
All right. Yeah. So what are we going to talk about today? And do we have some kind of inane blather? I mean, more than usual to kind of to grease the skids here?
I believe we don't.
No?
I think we're going to give the audience a breather.
We're going to give the gag a breather?
Right, yeah.
Nothing from the world of classic rock?
I was hoping that listeners would write in with their own gags.
Yeah, I was hoping so too.
So I think we actually did get one.
Or write in something to make us gag. What did we get?
I'm forgetting what the pun was.
Oh yeah.
But somebody came in with a.
I passed it on to you because I didn't get it.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. But was it our nemesis? It wasn't Tom.
It was not Tom.
Okay. All right.
No. Tom's taking a break, thankfully.
Okay, good.
So something from classic rock, something from the world of country western. I was combing the shelves, of my great vinyl collection of country western albums.
Yes.
I don't have any of those, actually. Something in the Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton realm, and I got nothing.
You got nothing.
Garth Brooks.
It's all right. I mean, we can return to it. Maybe our audience is saying, "Thank goodness, we need a break from that inanity."
I think so. I hear the horns blaring, the rejoicing.
Right. I do find myself driving around or walking between buildings. I'm trying to think of lost in thought, trying to think of a gag.
It was a good run.
It was a good run.
I think we had about a dozen, maybe.
Yeah.
But we're going to give it a breather.
We'll give it a breather.
What are we talking about today, Jeff?
We are talking about Asclepius, the son of Apollo, the healing deity or healing demigod, and in particular his role at the healing sanctuary of Epidauros.
Epidauros.
Yes.
Interesting. Which is on the Peloponnese,
It
right?
is. Yep. Up in the northeastern corner.
Yes.
Yep.
How far of a drive is that from Athens? I mean, if you could swim across the Saronic Gulf.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not a very good swimmer, but an accomplished swimmer It's not very far as the crow flies.
It's not. But I mean, I would say, boy.
2.5 hours?
I was going to say around, at least 2 hours.
You have to go up along the coast of the Gulf there. You got to go past Cenchreae and through Corinth, and then you got to go down the Thesian highway past Eleusis and get to Athens.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. And once you get outside of Athens, and once you get into the Peloponnese or northern Greece, it's not that easy getting places.
No. Right. The roads are, they're in good shape because they don't have any bad weather like we do.
Right.
But they're small.
They are.
And they're very labyrinthine and circuitous, given the terrain.
And it's one of the things I like about going to places like Epidauros and Mycenae is that they are still very much off the beaten path.
Yes.
Right? It's not like a Rome where you have these layers of time.
Right.
It's kind of these places frozen in time that are out in the valleys and out amongst the mountains.
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
It is. Yep. So I think there are 11 million people in contemporary Greece.
Yep.
And I think 5 million of them live in Athens.
That's right. Almost half. Yeah.
Once you get outside Athens, it's a completely different world.
Totally.
Very charming world.
Yeah.
So I understand that you, Dr. Winkle, have the opening quote today. Is that right?
I do. And I want to set this up is that one of the reasons that I'm kind of steeped in Epidaurian things is that this is the next 3D model. Recreation or reconstruction of the site that I'm working on. I'm almost done.
So having released the Eleusis fly through, the 3D model, now you've moved on to Epidauros.
Epidauros, which was much more of a challenge. It's a larger site.
It's got to be what? 10 times the size?
Pretty close.
It's huge.
It's spread out. That's part of it. So that was more of a challenge. And another one of the challenges is that there's a lot more questions about what a building is.
Right.
And there's just a lot of unknowns. Pausanias doesn't leave us much to chew on. And so that was a lot more kind of guesswork going into it. But
so Pausanias, 2nd century AD?
Yeah.
Okay. And he did his Greek travels. It's like a travelogue of all of his time around the Mediterranean.
Right.
And described these various sites.
Yes.
So that we know what they looked like when they were still active.
Exactly.
But you're saying his descriptions of Epidauros
are thin.
Yes.
And the
maybe he spent all his time in the gift shop.
Probably, right. Yeah. Now Pausanias, I think one of the great unsung heroes.
Yeah.
You read Pausanias, it's dry.
Yeah.
Right. It's not gripping reading. But if that did not survive, we wouldn't know half of the stuff that we know about these sites.
Yes, that's the way I feel about archaeologists.
Yeah.
Right? The actual material culture. I can't read that, for entertainment value, but I am so thankful that someone has done this work.
Yes, totally.
Because it enriches everything else.
Yeah, yes. And yes, I have the opening quote. This is kind of a main text. This is the main text that I'm using for my reconstruction and kind of following his leanings on these things. This is one R.A. Tomlinson, who wrote a book called Epidauros. Goes back to 1983. He was a professor of ancient history and archaeology at the University of Birmingham in England. Okay. I say was because I'm assuming that he's no longer with
deceased.
us.
So what do you think the R.A. In R.A. Tomlinson stands for?
Boy, I really hope that kind of R stands for RIP.
I was going to think it's maybe really awesome.
Really, really awesome. That's what he went by, right?
Really awesome Tomlinson. So let's have the quote, Dr. Winkle.
So he writes, this comes from page 19 of the book I just mentioned. And he's describing the method by which people would seek healing.
So this is going to be similar to how they would approach Apollo at Delphi.
Yes.
But for different reasons. Yes. So at Delphi, it was give us knowledge. And here at Epidauros, it's give us health.
Give us health. Give us healing. Right. So Tomlinson writes, each individual had to approach the god by way of a set ritual. This included preliminary sacrifice and purification by ritual bathing. The general method of approach was for the suppliant to spend a night sleeping in the sanctuary, a special building, the abaton, being provided for this purpose. While the suppliant was asleep, the god manifested himself, generally in the form of a vision, which the suppliant remembered. Alternatively, the suppliant might be approached by a sacred snake.
Interesting.
Yes.
So the sacred snake, was it a vision of the snake, or was there an actual, I'm not asking a facetious question, in the abaton, this sleep chamber, was there an actual snake that approached?
There were actual snakes.
Okay.
Right. So there was these sacred snakes that shared the dormitory. I mean, this is one of the creepiest and most fascinating aspects of this ritual that I've encountered.
Yeah.
And so the snake is a symbol associated with Asclepius. He's the staff with a snake wrapped around it that our listeners will recognize from the backs of ambulances, right?
Right.
And that the snake was a often a chthonic symbol.
Yes.
And
we need to define that for the audience in case they haven't listened to the, 40 other times that we've mentioned the word chthonic. From the Greek chthon, meaning the ground.
Yes, coming from below, from the underworld.
Right.
And so he was, Asclepius, he has, prophetic aspects of his father, Apollo. And the snakes represented that kind of link to the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And so a snake could approach you as you slept in the dormitory. I don't know how one could sleep in this place with the snakes crawling around.
I don't know.
No. But they were seen to be kind of a living embodiment of the god. And if you were approached by one, it was a good sign.
Yeah. I have trouble sleeping if there's a dog wandering around outside.
Really?
Well, the animal might come in and lick my face while I'm asleep. I don't want that.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Right.
But sleeping with snakes in the actual confines, so chthonic from the earth, right? And snakes shed their skin.
Yes.
I think annually, once per year. So it becomes the symbol of rebirth, of resurrection, because the entire animal, so it seemed to the ancients, I guess. I'm not entirely comfortable with this interpretation because it seems a little bit too dismissive of their ability to reason through things.
Yeah.
But it seems to be that they thought the snake replaces its entire being once per year. That's a sign of health or rejuvenation.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely a big part of it here. So that, in terms of, literature, that goes back to Gilgamesh.
Right.
He gets the plant that would give him eternal life.
Yeah.
But it's eaten by the snake before he can eat it. And then that idea that the snake is a creature that never dies.
Right.
It just kind of sheds its old self. So you find this in lots of cultures around the world. But
yes.
Yeah, clearly that was a big part of it at Epidauros as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Endlessly recreating itself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the Abaton, do you remember the foundations of this building? The Abaton? We're going to talk about it later in the episode, right?
Yeah.
It's if I remember correctly, and I'm nowhere near the level of knowledge and expertise as you. It's a massive building.
It's huge.
Right? It's the dimensions are enormous.
Right. It's a long. The way that as I've studied the foundations and recreated it, it's a long rectangular hall.
Yes.
And it had an upper floor and it also had kind of a lower floor. And there was a row of columns down the middle of it. And as it's usually been reconstructed, there was kind of a row of beds along the edge, and the snakes were kind of roaming free there. So it would accommodate several dozens of people sleeping in this dormitory to hopefully receive their visions.
Yeah. Were there vending machines on the second floor? What was up there?
They were in the lower level.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. Along with the general snack area.
Was there anything up on the second floor though?
The second
was a viewing area.
No, both floors were part of the dormitory.
Oh, okay.
You could sleep on either floor. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So we got to deal with the myths of Asclepius, right? As we get into this, before we talk about the shrine and all of its glory, we have to talk about the person of Asclepius, where he came from, and so forth.
Yes, and as I put this together, I was thinking of you, Dave, and I made sure to incorporate some Greek for you to start.
I appreciate
fluid
that.
Readings. Yes.
Okay.
Right. So Asclepius himself, students of mythology will not be surprised by this. There are many versions of his origin, and again, the Greeks. I think the Greeks were much more comfortable with paradoxes and conflicting versions than we tend to be.
Yes.
My students always want to know, well, what's the real story?
Right.
And that's often a fool's errand. And so I'm going to go through what, again, I'm following Tomlinson's lead here, what we take to be kind of the most commonly accepted versions of it.
Okay.
And so from Pindar's Third Pythian Ode, there is a very short Homeric hymn to Asclepius, which I would ask Dave to read in just a second. Ovid mentions Asclepius a few times in his Metamorphoses.
Is that book 2 he talks about Asclepius?
Yes, and he shows up elsewhere.
Okay.
The Hippolytus story and such. But the general accepted version is Apollo, the god Apollo, has an affair with a mortal, Coronis, who was a daughter of a Thessalian king. Coronis is unfaithful to Apollo along the way. And a raven witnesses her betrayal.
So the raven is flying over while this young woman, Coronis, is having a tryst with someone other than Apollo.
Exactly.
To whom she is supposed to be faithful.
Right.
And then what happens?
And then, depending on the version that you read, Coronis is done away with. Either Apollo himself shoots her with his arrows, or his sister. Artemis does so. Yes. So
that's really harsh.
It's harsh, right? But not uncommon for. There's lots of stories that.
Absolutely.
Vain, right?
If you are the object of the god's affection and then you are unfaithful to that god or goddess,
yes,
you're going to suffer for it.
Right. So one of the sticking points here is as we'll see, is it seems in the most accepted stories about Asclepius, he has his origins in the north,
Okay.
Thessaly, kind of north central mainland Greece. And Epidauros,
Things are crazy up there, right? It's kind of a wild place,
it
isn't
is,
it?
right. Witches and witchcraft,
Right.
and darkness and such. And so in the earliest stories of Asclepius, that's where he belongs. And there were various Asclepia and cult sites that embraced him there. But the most famous that we're talking about today, Epidauros, of course, is not in North Central Greece.
Right.
And we'll see that they had to kind of twist themselves into a bit of a pretzel to kind of justify why Asclepius kind of really belonged to the south. But before we get into that, Dave, will you read these, I think, what is it?
It's like 5 lines
of the very short Homeric hymn to Asclepius?
Yes. So this is an excerpt, right, of the Homeric hymn?
Yes.
Right. And so it's 5 lines of dactylic hexameter. So it should sound something like this. Ieterdranason Asclepian arcoma eidein, huian Apollo noston age nata diacaronis, dotio en perio curdre flegu u basileos, charma meganthro poesikakon thelkter dradunaon, kai sumen hu to chairdre wanaxli to mai desa oide.
Very nicely done.
Thank you.
And this translation comes from I'm not always the biggest fan of rhymey translations because I think
Really?
you sacrifice meaning.
I understand.
But-
I understand.
Right, I think-
but a lot of the translating I've done
Yeah.
recently, and you probably wouldn't like it therefore,
Well,
is put into rhyme just to try to make it a little more palatable to an English audience.
I totally get that. In terms of
Okay.
like personal reading or performance,
Yes.
you got to grab them, right? So, and very literal translations can come off very dry.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think I took this from this is the translation you would find on the Perseus project, right?
All right.
It translates: Asclepius the healer, I begin to sing, son of Apollo. It was in the Dottian plain where Coronis the fair, King Phlegius' daughter, bore him. He takes care of savage pangs, a joy to men. Hail, Lord! My prayer to you, my song will now afford. Right, and I believe that is the entire text of this particular.
That's
Homeric
it.
hymn. That's it.
Wow.
Yep.
Just 5 lines.
Right. So you compare this to something like the Homeric hymn to Demeter or
Yes.
Hermes.
Or Hermes. They're long.
Very,
They're
very long.
Apilia, right?
Right.
Little mini epics.
So we get the kind of the core details
Okay.
of Asclepius is a child of Apollo and Coronis and was born to this king of Thessaly.
And we get a little bit of a geographical indication too on the Dottian plain.
Right.
And we get a little sketch of his career, right?
Yes.
He brings joy to men because he takes care of savage pangs.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Right. And Homeric hymns, they're not composed by Homer, but they date back to 7th century, I want
Yes.
to say. Yeah.
The
So,
contemporary with Hesiod or shortly thereafter.
yeah. So in terms of the antiquity of
Right.
the writing, it's pretty early.
Yes, generally taken to be very old.
Right. So, again, according to the more accepted traditions, so Apollo or Artemis kills Coronis, and then Apollo rescues Asclepius as an unborn child from the womb
Okay.
of Coronis and hands him off to Chiron, the centaur.
Oh, that's original.
It's almost a cliche, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Who else was raised by Chiron?
We had Jason.
Yes.
And then Achilles was also trained by Chiron.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's in that line.
Yes. Did you ever do an apprenticeship with Chiron?
Chiron? No, he was always booked up.
Yeah.
Right? And then now apparently he's running a daycare. I mean, he's spoken for.
He's spoken for.
Right. And so if our listeners are unfamiliar, the centaur, kind of a Greek Yoda,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So
But this one is unusual because most of the centaurs are known for their savagery and ferocity.
Right.
And their inability to handle liquor.
yes,
So
exactly.
you don't want to mess with them because they are libidinous, cruel, savage creatures, invading weddings, causing havoc.
Yes.
Not good neighbors.
Not good neighbors,
But
right.
this guy is the exception.
He's the exception,
He stands out.
right? And there's and associated with that, they are also these creatures of kind of deep nature, and they have a wisdom that is in some cases even kind of beyond the gods.
Yes, they're chimeric, right?
Right.
Anytime you stick 2 different species together, who knows what's going to result?
Right.
Like the Huron, right? Half horse, half man.
yeah.
Batman.
Batman.
There's another one.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So they have this deep kind of magical wisdom that even seems to elude most of the Olympians.
Yes.
And so in the Asclepius story is that the centaur's expertise in hunting and particularly healing are the gifts that are passed on to Asclepius. So he gets his Jedi training here. Now I can't remember. Did you
Veterinary medicine, basically.
Right. Yeah. Right. Have you on principle avoided all the Harry Potter books? Did you read those?
No.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
I mean, sometimes if things are popular, you tend to.
Well, you know me well.
They're very popular. Said, "No, I'm not going to bother with that." Right?
I read the Latin version of I think the first 2.
Yep.
But I haven't read the remainder of them. I've watched Peter. I think Peter Needham is a translator. Did an excellent job on those. And I have the Greek edition of Harry Potter of the first book. I haven't read that yet.
Oh, there's one in Greek. I didn't even know there was
It's
a
in
Greek
very good Attic Greek.
Is that right?
It's brilliantly done.
Wow.
So sometimes these translations, as you know, I don't like them.
Yes.
But the Greek and Latin translations of Harry Potter are excellent. I've watched maybe 4 out of the 7 movies. I don't know.
Okay.
So where's this question going?
Well, there's a similar figure in the Harry Potter legend. I think she actually shows up in the later books. So the stuff that she'd either read or seen probably wouldn't have encountered.
Okay.
But there's the Forbidden Forest on the edge of Hogwarts.
Oh, right.
And
is that next to the Gumdrop Forest, perhaps?
Right. Yeah. Now you're mixing.
Am I?
Yeah, the Wizard of Oz, right?
You know, the Candyland.
Okay. What am I talking about? Right.
That's okay.
Right. But one of the reasons the students are supposed to stay out of there is because there's the wild centaurs there. But there's one, Ferenz, who is kind of your Chiron.
Okay.
And I think he actually even later becomes part of the faculty
Interesting.
at Hogwarts.
Interesting.
Right.
That J.K. Rowling, she could write a mean story.
She could.
There's no doubt about it.
Right. So
that's our dream podcast guest,
get
right?
JK on
I don't think it's going to
I don't
happen.
think it's going to happen either. I would have to think that Ms. Rowling would have to know these stories.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Right? And so I mean,
definitely.
That's not accidental.
Mm-hmm.
So he's brought up by the centaur, and then like Jason, when he returns from the wilderness into the city, he's ready to hit the ground running.
That's correct.
Yep.
He's stuffed with horsey knowledge.
He is.
He's got a couple of sons, does he not?
He does. Mentioned in Homer, they are mentioned as kings of Thessaly, I think, in the catalog of ships.
Right. Book 2 of the Iliad.
So all of this seems to underline the fact that has his origins as a northern god. And so when Epidauros gets their hands on him, like I said, they have to justify why he's down there.
Right.
So Epidauros is one of many of these Asclepia that you find dotting the landscape in Greece. Italy adopts.
So these would be like not hospitals, but urgent care centers? Is that the idea?
Or urgent care center, I think, equal with a spa.
Okay.
Because we'll see there's lots of soaking going on in these areas, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but Epidauros becomes the most famous of these. And I think one of the kind of the downsides of because Epidauros becomes so famous, we tend to forget this was really just one of many. But even in antiquity, it seems that Epidauros becomes the favored spa, care center, hospital for the ancients in Greece. If you were serious about curing your arthritis, you were going to go to Epidauros.
So isn't there a place in Germany, Baden-Baden? I think it's a
yes.
It's a spa center.
The spa's so nice they named it twice.
Something like that. Do we have any place like that here in the United States? It'd be the Mayo Clinic, maybe.
I guess so. I was just hearing
where they slather you with a mixture of eggs and soybean oil.
Right. I don't know how effective that is.
I don't know.
Right. I was hearing something or listening to a podcast talking about like natural hot springs.
Oh, wait a minute.
Right.
You're listening to other podcasts?
I do.
You don't just listen to Ad Nauseam?
Over and over? I just like to listen to the sound of my own voice?
To pump our numbers?
I still... Is that what you're doing? You're just clicking?
Maybe.
Boosting these things? No, I do listen to others' podcasts. This one was talking about because some natural hot springs up in the mountains in Colorado.
Oh.
It was reminding me of these kind of places of natural geothermal places of healing. Right?
Yes, I don't think, though, we have a nationally recognized center of health rejuvenation.
No.
Here in the United States. The closest would be famous hospitals, right? Like
right.
The Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic.
Right, exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, the Cleveland Clinic. Yeah. But nothing like this is kind of like a centralized place.
Or maybe such places exist, but we just don't have the coin to visit them.
Right.
They're being kept from us, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
Keep out the riffraff. Yeah. So Asclepius is mortal, though.
Right.
That's kind of odd,
so
isn't
he's referred to as often as kind of a god of healing, a god of medicine, but he's a demigod.
Okay.
And because a very important part of his story is that he actually dies. So he gains fame as a divinely skilled doctor associated with miracles, coming from his divine side. But he commits an act of hubris, which is followed by a catastrophe, as so often happens in these stories. And he brings Hippolytus back from the dead. And this enrages Zeus.
Hippolytus is the son of Theseus, is he not?
Yes, exactly.
And he's dies because of some wishes. This is in Euripides'
Right.
Euripides' tragedy of the same name.
Yep.
So Asclepius gets involved, brings him back from the dead.
Yep.
And then what happens?
And then Zeus says it doesn't work like that, and you have to kind of balance out the fates. This is something if our listeners go way back, they heard our episode of Alcestis.
Right.
Same kind of issues involved, right? If you bring somebody back, somebody else has to go down.
I see.
And so Zeus blasts Asclepius with a thunderbolt, and he's technically dead, but then he becomes this chthonic spirit whose power lives on. Yeah.
So that he can speak to Luke when he's about to blow up the Death Star, for example.
Right, yeah. We're back to Star Wars once again.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That's right. Use the Force.
Right.
Right. And so they've developed various traditions about who got his body.
Okay.
And those...
It's a totem, is that right?
Right. Getting the body of who gets to bury Theseus, who gets to bury Oedipus. Of course, is very important in the Sophocles.
Yeah, in the Oedipus at Colonus.
Right. So if you can get the body, then it becomes a talisman for your location.
That's right, habeas corpus, right there.
Yep.
So just to anticipate the very end of the episode, you probably didn't see this coming, but when I would at the very end talk about the Moss method,
yes,
the story of Asclepius and Hercules and Zeus, waving his angry fist and threatening thunderbolts, is in the Moss Reader.
No way.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Have you done a video on that one yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
But I'm getting there. So it's
Excellent.
Lucian, right, of Samosata. He tells these stories.
Right.
The Menippean satires of the gods.
Yeah. Excellent.
But back to the story.
Right. So then various places claim to have the body of Asclepius. And I think the most famous one is at Epidauros. And so the radiant center of the power of the cult stems from that. We'll talk about this, that Tholos building.
Yes.
Which claimed to mark the gravesite of Asclepius,
where he was in fact buried, where his body is.
And yes, and the chthonic power kind of comes from that. The healing power.
Okay.
Out. So he has this afterlife as a kind of god. He's not like Heracles, who dies and he becomes an Olympian deity.
Yes, he has apotheosis.
So Asclepius, he stays dead. He doesn't take on a kind of another immortal form, but his power lives on in this more, I guess, kind of spiritual chthonic way. Yeah.
So now we know how his body got to Epidauros.
Yes.
Right? But what happens next? Why is Epidauros important?
Epidauros is important because, other versions develop that explain why Asclepius is associated with them. And so we see kind of this fascinating borrowing or transport of kind of taking him out of the north and explaining, why he really belongs here. And so it's actually Pausanias who has a version that Phlegius, the father of Coronis, he tells a story that he was actually, he was a soldier and he came down from the north to spy on the Peloponnese. And he brought with him his daughter Coronis, who was pregnant at the time. He did not realize that she was pregnant.
So this is Asclepius' grandfather.
Yes.
Phlegius, the king in Thessaly.
Yes. And while his daughter was there, they happened to be down at Epidauros while he was doing some general spying.
Okay.
And she gave birth in the sanctuary down there. And so this is a different version than Apollo rescuing the fetus.
Okay.
And
alternative story.
Yep.
In order to get Asclepius to Epidauros. That's the explanation.
Right. Yep. And Tomlinson, in his version of this, he makes a comment. He says there is an air of contrivance about this.
Oh, come on, Tomlinson.
Kind of twisting it to justify Epidaurian possession.
That's like my whole career, right? That's like my whole CV.
The air of contrivance.
There is an air of contrivance about this. Right?
Right.
The CV, the curriculum vitae, right? In academia, there's an air of contrivance about this. 20% of every resume is padding.
Yeah, at least.
I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I'm trying to get mine to 25, but I can't get the needle to move.
Gotcha.
It's stuck at 20.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So this is not an uncommon thing.
No.
You find this all over the place.
Right.
Where a god is worshipped, there has to be a backstory to explain why this is the legitimate place.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's kind of a retroactive justification of the presence of this cult here. And I thought this was, archaeologically speaking, even more interesting is that what's been found on the site near the temple of Asclepius, which is right in kind of the heart of the sanctuary, right next to the Abaton, there was a poet by the name of Isilos. We don't know anything else about him. But some lines survive. And he writes, Malos first built an altar of Apollo Maliatus and enriched the sanctuary with sacrifice. So we'll talk about this later, but there is... have you ever been to the sanctuary of Apollo Maliatus, which is kind of on the outskirts of Epidauros? It's like up in the hills?
I don't think I have been. As I go through in my mind's eye the site, of course, the theater, the gift shop, the Abaton, the stadium.
Yep.
the Tholos right there, which is still under construction.
Right.
And then off to what I think would be it'd be on the north side is the little church.
Yes, exactly.
The 4th century church
Yep.
that we're going to talk about later. But I think that's the extent really of my perusal of the site.
Yeah. I had no idea this existed until I started doing some of this reconstruction. And it's never been part of when we've been
Correct.
there together. And other times I've been there with a guide. It's never mentioned, but as I understand it, there's like about a 20-minute hike you can take up in the mountains above the theater.
Yes.
And there's this little sanctuary to this aspect of Apollo that's mentioned here.
Apollo Maliatus.
Maliatus, and someone suggested that's really where the Epidaurian healing trance began.
Okay.
And then it kind of moved to the valley.
That's their explanation.
Yes.
Okay.
So Aeschylus goes on. He says, not even in Tricca of Thessaly would you try to go down into the Aditon of Asclepius.
Aditon is a word that means shrine.
Right.
Just want to throw that out there.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
Unless you first sacrificed on the holy altar of Apollo Maliatus. And there's some question about what exactly that term for Maliatus is taken. Solomon suggests it was taken from Cape Malea in southern Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And so a particular form of Apollo's identity that was transported north. And so it's clear that the author was very aware of Asclepius' association with Thessaly.
Okay.
And he's saying, just like you would never think of going down into the Asclepia of
Right.
north without doing this first. Same thing here.
Okay.
So he says,
Same rules apply.
Same rules apply, right?
Okay.
And then later in a prose section of the same document, he writes, Zeus gave the muse Erato to Malos, the guy that we mentioned earlier, as his bride. Phlegyas, who dwelt in Epidaurus, married the daughter of Malos and Erato, Cleophema, and had by her a daughter, Agle.
We're getting a lot of names here.
Called Coronis because of her beauty. And so here he's transporting some of these Thessalian figures down into Epidaurus and saying, no, their whole family lineage is down here.
And giving a genealogy.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And he says she was seduced by Apollo and bore a child in the sanctuary. Apollo called the child Asclepius from the mother's name, Agle. So here he gives various names for Coronis.
Okay.
As a way of trying to kind of shoehorn the elements of the best known version of the story into an Epidaurian version, which would justify the sanctuary's
his presence
claim.
down there.
Yes, exactly.
Because if I'm going to understand this correctly, this particular author recognized that Asclepius has a northern Thessalian origin. So how do we explain his presence here?
Right.
This is the account that's given.
Yeah.
And I'm not implying, by the way, that he didn't believe it was true.
Right.
This is
right.
scholars looking at it later with perhaps a somewhat skeptical eye. The phrase you used was retro-justify.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is very common. You find it all over Greece. But I also just find it interesting is that it was not enough to say, okay, the god has a northern origin. This is just his center of worship down here. There has to be some kind of groundedness in the earth itself.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to be very important for the belief system of people, who are going there for healing.
Right. I would say, at the risk of offending persons, perhaps, that it's not altogether different from the way in which European cities competed for the saints' relics.
Oh, yeah.
And bodies.
Right.
In the sense that, this is where such and such a saint actually died and is buried, because it was thought to confer a certain amount of cachet and bring in business, and no doubt for holy motives as well as the commercial and patriotic reasons.
Right. And isn't it true that for not all, but for as an altarpiece in Catholic churches, is that to have a relic of a saint kind of gives it that same kind of radiant mysticism that that maybe the bones of Asclepius would have for this site. I don't want to offend
That's
anybody,
my understanding,
yes,
but
okay.
I don't have deep knowledge of these things.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a quite striking corollary.
Right.
Right.
And speaking of lack of deep knowledge,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by the good folks at Ratio Coffee. Dave, I'm on an educator's schedule.
Okay.
And, during the summer
You're
months.
a scheducator.
Yes, exactly. During the summer months, things are a bit more loose, and I still love to have my coffee in the morning. But once I'm back on that early morning schedule,
right,
having my coffee in the morning becomes just even more essential than it is in the previous, few months.
It's like military time, right? You're on 0700.
Exactly. Right. And so to have my ratio ready to go and going through its simple phases of the bloom, the brew, and the ready has never been more important. And so this morning it was.
Now, do you grind the night before?
I do grind the night before.
Do you also fill the reservoir with water the night before?
So it's all I got to do is just touch that button.
Yes.
Right. And so this morning, it was after the holiday weekend.
Yes.
A little more difficult getting back into
Feeling a little sluggish maybe after the Labor Daying.
Exactly.
Celebrating the AFL-CIO and the Teamsters.
Exactly. Nonstop. Yeah, you know me. And so to have that ready to go and to brew up perfectly and to deliver a hot cup of Java to my wife upstairs, it's
who
great.
Also had to go into work, right?
Yes.
And she probably was thrilled that you brought her that nice, delicious cup of automatic pour over from the Ratio 8.
Absolutely. And starting the day like that just makes everything go better, right? So, Dave, you have the 8.
I do.
I have the 8.
I'm enjoying it so much. I also pre-measured out my water last night.
Yes.
I got my own little ritual that involves the cooking of poultry products and pig products on the stovetop.
Yep.
While the coffee's brewing.
Nice.
Just one little push. Yeah. I come back. The timing's perfect.
Right. And
it's really a luxurious life we lead. Let's be honest.
And the smell wafting through the house.
Great.
The simple pleasures.
I love the wafting.
Right. And as I remember.
Or the off-gassing.
The off-gassing, yes. You're the only coffee drinker in your house, right?
Yes, presently.
So this is a kind of a very personal ritual for yourself. Right?
Which means that I might eventually depart from the 8 and start going to the 4.
What is this 4 you speak of?
Well, but I like the way you're playing dumb.
Okay.
It's very persuasive.
Yeah.
The Ratio 4 is coming out in October, end of September, early October. We're almost there.
Yes.
And this is going to revolutionize luxury coffee or premium coffee delivery. Because if you've ever traveled to a hotel, many of the hotels, they have an in-room coffee maker. Mm-hmm. It's a little piece of squirty plastic stuff.
It's usually terrible, yes.
And they give you this tea baggy thing that has coffee in it.
Yeah.
Awful. I expect to see the Ratio 4 in all of these hotels eventually because it's got the same guts, the same mechanism as the 6 and the 8, but in a smaller form factor. The same 5-year warranty. No more marsupods.
No.
Like Keurig puts out a little bit of Joey in every sip.
That's right.
Why not patronize a local brewer and then use the Ratio 8, 6, or 4?
Why not? Yeah, exactly. So stay tuned. So we're hoping to have a promotion, a giveaway.
That's right.
And so
maybe we'll drink some in the studio and make obnoxious sipping sounds.
that'd be, I'm sure our audience would love that. Right. So, I mean, if you're in that camp where you would love to have a 6 or 8, but it's a little bit kind of beyond your price point, this might be exactly what you're looking for. And so stay tuned. But in the meantime, if you want to pick up one of these machines, the 6 or the 8, you go to ratiocoffee.com. That's RATIO coffee.com. Find the machine you want. And Dave, what should they do after that?
They should put in this coupon code for the month of September. It is ANCOH5. So AN ad nauseum, CO coffee, the letter H, and then the number 5.
Yes. And I think that given this episode, the H stands for healing.
It does.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right.
The coffee, the warmth, and the flavor is going to kind of shore up your morning.
Absolutely.
So the H is for healing.
Healing, yes.
Interesting.
And if you do that,
ANCOH5.
and that will get you 15% off your entire order.
Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the fine folks at Hackett Publishing. Hackett, with offices in Cambridge, Ma, and Indianapolis, have been purveying fantastic works of literature to a mass audience for now 53 years, I believe.
Yes.
I am at the website, beautifully designed, and I'm seeing 3 categories right off the top. Asian Studies, view all new Asian Studies titles. Readings in Classical Chinese Philosophy, the 3rd edition. I'm seeing an introduction to utilitarianism under philosophy, and of course, Ovid's Heroides, a new translation by Stanley Lombardo and Melina McClure.
Wow, there's our guy Stan.
That's right. So you talk about range.
Yes.
This publisher has a fantastic range, but the volumes, Jeff, they're aesthetically ugly, right, and way overpriced. Is that correct?
You would think that'd be a way to keep their costs down. But strangely enough, it's quite the opposite.
Okay.
They are beautiful, attractive volumes. The artwork is always striking. It's often very clever. But they managed to do this at a price point that is extremely affordable.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Your students, I understand, in your myth and world religions classes and such, are enjoying some Hackett titles as we speak.
Yes, we are about to start Mr. Lombardo's wonderful translation of the Odyssey.
All right.
And my students love that they can get that translation brand new for under $10.
That is incredible.
It's unheard of.
Yes. Yep. And so the Odyssey has the moonshot, is that right?
It does.
And the Iliad is the Normandy landing
right
as the cover.
Yep.
So attractive covers,
yep,
accurate translations,
yes,
extensive notes, and affordability.
Affordability, right. And like you said, on the website, you can find just the massive range of topics. So
now people like to curse the darkness, right?
Yes.
They say people aren't reading the classics. They're canceling the great works of Western literature, and in some ways, all literature. So what are people going to do? Are they going to curse the darkness?
No, they are going to light a candle, right? And you do that by going to Hackett and picking up some of these works. Build your library.
Right.
I find as I get older, one of my, again, great simple pleasures is filling those shelves with these wonderful books. And you can do it on a budget.
That's right.
With Hackett. And you know you're going to be getting good stuff.
That's correct.
And not only that, you're going to be supporting this podcast.
Right.
Who is attempting to do a similar kind of thing of keeping the flame of the classics alive.
Absolutely. Well said. So well said, Dr. Winkle. So listener, if you'd like to, at the same time, build your library and support the podcast, keep the flame alive, please go to hackettpublishing.com, HACKETT. Browse through the shelves, you might say, drop some things in your little grocery satchel. And then when you get to checkout, you're going to want to put in this coupon code, Jeff.
AN2024.
AN2024. And what will that get them?
That will get them two amazing things, 20% off your entire order and free shipping.
And the third thing,
yes,
the satisfaction of supporting Ad Nauseam.
Very important. Check it out. All right, Dave, as we get back into it, for the second half, we're going to take a kind of a brief tour to the site of Epidauros. And
do I need my fanny pack?
You need your fanny pack.
Okay.
You need your, you need the, what was that? What did you take with you? What do we call it?
What?
Your trunky?
Oh, my man case.
Your man case, exactly.
My purse, my man purse.
Right, exactly. You're going to need that along.
You just said that on the air.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
So, I think in the description, listeners, if you have a device nearby, I think we'll provide a link where you can access a site plan.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want to walk through this, we're not going to attend to every little nook and cranny, but I've picked a few highlights of the site and maybe talk about what they were used for and what some of the mysteries that still remain about them.
Are we going to pet the many stray dogs that kind of lays around the site of Epidauros?
Right, or the ones, remember the ones that would kind of adopt you as their pack, they'd become the pack leader?
That's right. They were just looking for tips.
Right, is that what it was?
Right.
Yeah, looking for treats.
Yeah.
So if you were in antiquity, if you were approaching the site, and you needed healing, you'd approach it from the north, and the first thing you would come to was this, what's so-called this grand propylaea, entry gate.
Yes, a propylaea. This is the part in front of the gates.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. And it was a building that was simply had this purpose. You would pass through the building, and out the other side is this interior columned gate that would kind of welcome you to the sanctuary. Yes, right, to get you across that liminal space.
Like when you pull up to the Best Western.
Yeah.
Hotel or even the average Western.
Yeah.
They have a kind of a porte cochere sort of thing.
Yes.
Some columns, maybe some potted plants.
Right.
You bring your vehicle up, and the idea is we're telling you this is how to get into the place.
Yes.
And we're doing it with a little bit of flair.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Like the perhaps the better known propylaea on the Acropolis.
Exactly.
Right. It wasn't just a walk through this door. It was walk through this almost this grand temple of its own.
That's correct. Beautiful, beautiful structure, by the way.
Yeah. And what's so striking about, not so striking, but one of the striking things about the propylaea and so many buildings that have been excavated at Epidauros is that they are ramped.
Yes.
And so they are there.
There's a dromos.
Yeah, there's a drum. Yes, and this was built for people who had to be wheeled in, right? And so
you think that was the reason?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. You find that like the entrances to the temples have a kind of a flat ramp in a way that you don't really find anywhere else. And it had to have been for this particular reason. Yep.
So when you go to one of the nearby grocery purveyors, right, Meyer, Thrifty Acres,
yes.
Right? And Michiganders call it Myers, of course.
Yes.
You go to the entrance. It has the opening door, right? The little eye sensor.
Yep.
So at one time that was state of the art.
Yes.
Not every place would do that, but Meyer was one of the first.
Yes, exactly.
So I can very much remember as a kid waving my hand in front of it to do the Jedi mind trick.
Exactly. Great
and
fun.
I still do that for my kids. I tell them, watch my power to open this door from afar. Right? Do you do that with your sons?
I should, but your kids, even at their age, are they still? Are they
no,
like, Dad, what are you doing?
They don't like it at all. Stop embarrassing me.
Exactly right.
I'm wearing my windbreaker and my pump up Reeboks, and
well, there are in my top 10 of joys, embarrassing my children.
Oh yeah,
it's way up there.
It's way up there.
Right.
So you enter through the Great Propylaea.
Yep.
Right, north and south facade, 6 ramps, 6 ionic columns.
Yep.
A frieze of bull's heads.
Yes. Yep.
And rosettes.
Yep.
And what was inside the Propylaea?
Not a whole lot. It was kind of an empty room. where you would pass through. Again, the idea seems to have been just to kind of welcome you to the site.
Is there a bowl of mints or something?
There might have been a bowl of mints. Would you feel better if there was some
Absolutely.
some refreshments? All right, okay, let's say there was a bowl of mints.
Who wants to approach Asclepius with bad breath?
Yeah, true. Exactly. Right. So then you would enter and you'd walk south through the site. One of the larger buildings that you would encounter would have been on your immediate left, which is one of the buildings that we don't really know what it was. It was Tomlinson calls it the Stoa of Cotys, and if our listeners are looking at the diagram linked on the website, you'll notice that the person who made that diagram identifies the Stoa of Cotys as something else in the site. So,
interesting.
So there was a certain person by that name who donated money for the refurbishment of some building, and archaeologists disagree about which one it was. And so this was a stoa, kind of a large kind of columned hall that seemed to have the Romans added a number of pools and bath complexes to it. And so it would have been a place where maybe you could buy something to eat.
Okay.
Right. There were shops.
Right.
But places for visitors to ritually bathe as part of their healing rite. Yep. And then kind of further into the site.
So we go on from the Stoa of Cotys. We've gone through the Propylaea.
Yep.
Picked up some mints.
Yep.
Past the Stoa of Cotys.
Maybe taking a dip.
Yes.
And gotten a sandwich.
And this dip is not it's not for recreation. It's ritual lathing, right?
Probably.
I don't want to go in there with any kind of miasma or pollution on my skin. I got to wash it off.
Exactly.
With a Dove bar or maybe some Irish Spring.
Right, exactly. Irish Spring, remember that?
I do. What do you mean remember it? I live it.
You live it, right? Remember in the ad, the guy would he'd cut the soap with
a knife.
I don't know why he did that, but
it was to show how substantive the soap was.
Oh, gotcha.
I guess. And when you cut it, the deodorant power it releases
almost knock you over.
Enough to knock you over.
You walk out smelling like a leprechaun.
That's right.
Right. So there's
so ritual cleansing.
So in recreating the site, there's at least 3 bath complexes on the site, and there was also a hotel for guests, and so we know that. I mean, there's a stadium, there's a theater. They hosted athletic contests, theater contests, and so I think we should say that Epidauros entertained guests not just for healing. That was its main purpose.
Right.
But
sports, the whole package.
Sports, the arts, it was all part of
it. It was a
site.
Destination.
Right.
In fact.
So some of this bathing could have been recreational.
Does Disney World have any kind of a hospital or spa element? Never been to Disney World.
Never been to Disney.
What about Disneyland?
I have been to Disneyland.
Okay.
Right. Which I understand is much less impressive than its Floridian counterpart.
Interesting.
But I don't remember.
Because the site of Epidauros has a kind of Disney World feel, but with the medical injection.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right. So, no water slides.
Not that I'm aware of.
No, exactly. So you'd move from there. You'd move further south into the site, and you would get to the heart of the shrine,
which is the abaton.
The abaton, which was part of this kind of rectangular. Kind of central shrine area included the abaton. It included the tholos, which purportedly marked the grave of Asclepius.
Now, to define some terms here, if I may.
Sorry, yes.
You're going pretty fast.
Right.
Not everyone is necessarily an initiate.
Yes.
The tholos is a circular building.
Yes.
Right. So the columns are all arranged in a circle.
Yep.
And instead of a typical architrave, which is a beam, the architrave is all circular as well.
Exactly.
So it's like a cylinder. This is one very popular architectural form. There's some Mycenaean kinds, but then they were revived during the classical and Hellenistic period.
Right, but remained also comparatively rare.
Yes.
Right. So you find there's the famous tholos of Athena at Delphi in the lower part of the shrine.
There's the famous tholos of Philip.
Yes.
Alexander's father at Olympia.
At Olympia, right. And so those two, along with this one, are the 3 ones that pop to mind.
Yes.
But you don't find these tholos-style temples very often.
The Jefferson Memorial, right, in Washington, D.C. is a tholos.
Exactly.
I think they're lovely. I like them a lot.
I do too. Right. So the 3 main buildings in this central shrine area were the abaton, the dormitory where you would sleep with the snakes. You had the tholos, which was the grave site of Asclepius, maybe the center from which the power of the site was believed to radiate. And then you also had in that central square, you had the temple to Asclepius himself. And then there were other attendant altars and some other buildings we don't fully understand. But that was the heart of it.
Okay. And we should also mention that the abaton has a second name.
Yes.
Right. It's the enkoimaterion.
Right.
From the Greek verb koimao, which means to snuggle down and go to sleep.
Exactly. Right. So you bring your sleeping bag in and you unroll it and you hunker down for the night.
That's right. And we have today the word cemetery, which is the place where the dead sleep.
Yes.
Same word.
There we go. Exactly. So this is where you would come, and this was the heart of the ritual. After you'd done your ritual bathing, there was certainly probably some diet cleanse that you were supposed to go through. Avoiding eating things and drinking certain things, and then you would
drink some cabbage juice or something.
Exactly, or that
do some purging,
lemon fast or something like that.
You speaking from personal experience here?
I hear things. That's what I'm saying, right?
All right.
And then you would sleep in the dormitory in this abaton. So the abaton, as we mentioned earlier, was kind of a 2-story structure, a long rectangular hall that seemed to have been, once you walked in, it was kind of a one big long open columned room, and a similar one right beneath it as a kind of basement. And then it would have been lined with beds.
Beds.
Yep.
Okay.
And there you would sleep.
Now you're going to think I have a thing here, but were there mints on the pillows?
I think if there were mints in the propylaea, I think that
we can forego the mints on the pillows.
No, I think that it would be you'd be safe to assume that they'd also be on the pillows.
Okay,
as well. It was a mint heavy sleep.
Right, a peppermint hotel.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and then what about votive offerings?
Yeah,
we have a lot of these.
A lot of these survive, right? So one of my favorite parts of the little museum there, I'm sure you remember. So all of these votives where people have these little sculptures of the body part that was ailing them.
Right.
You see ears and nose and eyes and elbows.
Right.
And then often with some inscription kind of thanking the god for healing them.
Right.
Yeah. And so a lot of the text of these votives survives. I have a few here that I thought would be.
You're going to read some translations?
Fun
That'd be great.
Yes.
Now, if I may, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
A votive, right?
Yeah.
Is maybe everybody knows this, but a votive offering is a dedication. It's like a combination prayer and act of gratitude, something that you give in response to what you have received from the god.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So one reads, Cleo was pregnant for 5 years. Okay. After the 5th year of pregnancy, she came as a suppliant to the god and slept in the abaton. As soon as she had left it and was outside the shrine, she gave birth to a son who, as soon as he was born, washed himself at the fountain and walked about with his mother.
The child's 5 years old, right?
Exactly. Right.
That is crazy.
Isn't that crazy? It goes on. After the success, she inscribed upon her offering, the wonder is not the size of the plaque, but the divine. Cleo was pregnant with a burden in her stomach for 5 years until she slept here, and he made her well. Okay.
So do you believe that this is what happened, or
I do not.
You do not?
I personally do not.
Fully skeptical.
I'm skeptical of this. I mean,
okay.
I believe there may have been a woman named Cleo who came here and was having some kind of
complications from
pregnancy, and things went better for her at Epidauros.
Okay.
And then maybe
would you give a naturalistic explanation? It's near the sea, so maybe the cooler temperatures or the sea salt air, or maybe the mints.
Right. I think that, what you also see in the museum, there are a lot of these medical instruments there.
Right.
So I think there's something to be said for Greek medical knowledge.
So there was some technology.
Technology kind of being ahead of its time, right? I dismiss the.
You're going to discount the supernatural altogether.
Altogether. Maybe the power of suggestion. I think maybe sleeping in a dormitory with other people, kind of believing and hoping for the same thing, could produce a dream that could offer itself up for interpretation. But
okay.
I look at these things as just kind of fascinating reading.
All right.
Above all,
you don't want to make a decision. You're saying.
Well, let's say I don't believe in the supernatural power of Asclepius.
Okay.
I reject that.
All right.
Right?
Keep going. Is another votive here?
Yeah. So I'm going to skip down here. So one says, a man who was paralyzed in all his fingers except one came as a suppliant to the god. When he was looking at the plaques in the sanctuary, he didn't believe in the cures.
Aha, just like Winkle.
Right, and was somewhat disparaging of the inscriptions. A lot of them apparently read like this. Somebody comes to Epidauros and maybe they're dragged by a friend and say, this is ridiculous, and then ends up being a believer, right? This goes on. So sleeping in the shrine, he saw a vision. It seemed he was playing the knuckle bones below the temple. And it's like a dice game, right?
Right.
And as he was about to throw them, the god appeared, sprang on his hand, and stretched out his fingers one by one. When he had straightened them all, the god asked him if he would still not believe the inscriptions on the plaques around the sanctuary, and he answered no. Therefore, since you doubted them before, though they were not unbelievable, from now on, he said, your name shall be Unbeliever. And when day came, he left well.
Huh.
So he gets healed, but he kind of gets a little punishment for it as well.
The punishment is to bear this sobriquet.
Right.
This very negative sobriquet. But the god healed him anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
It's really very interesting.
Can I read the one about Ambrosia?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Ambrosia from Athens, blind in one eye, she came as a suppliant to the god. Walking about the sanctuary, she ridiculed some of the cures as being unlikely and impossible. I think she would be a good podcast guest.
Yes.
Ambrosia, bring her on. The lame and the blind becoming well from only seeing a dream. Sleeping in the shrine, she saw a vision. It seemed to her the god came to her and said he would make her well, but she would have to pay a fee by dedicating a silver pig in the sanctuary as a memorial of her ignorance. When day came, she left well.
Right. Yep. So
it's a pig made out of silver?
I guess so.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, a pure cynic would say that a lot of this is kind of geared towards, we need to, you need to pony up.
Right.
Right. We're not doing this for free. So,
money mixed with religion? No way.
Oh, exactly. Right. It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to read one more, or are we moving on?
Let's move on.
All right.
Yep. And so right next to the Abaton, just across the little square there, you find that Tholos structure, also called the Thumeli.
All right.
And so there's still lots of mystery about what its function was.
Yep.
Most people think, Tomlinson's of the opinion that it could have marked the grave of Asclepius. It was kind of off limits, except for the priests of the cult.
Mm-hmm.
It's one. If you remember on the site,
it's not where they kept the dumpsters or something.
No.
Right.
No, that was elsewhere. The recycling was out back. If you remember it from the site, this is one of the buildings that they are slowly rebuilding.
Aren't the Greeks slowly rebuilding all their buildings?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's part of that grand
I remember.
restoration project
Yes.
that the Parthenon is part of.
Yes.
But it's moving at snail's pace.
Yes.
So I remember I was there with you in 2011.
That's correct. 13 years ago.
And I was there just a couple of years, a year and a half ago.
And
nothing has changed. Right? No progress at all.
Oh my.
Right. So 13 years or 12 years later.
It fell apart faster than that.
Right. But there's a small labyrinth underneath the floor there.
Oh, yes.
That people don't fully understand what it's there for. It's a very mysterious building. Right? And then also the third major building in that central square is the Temple of Asclepius, which is kind of a small kind of Parthenon style temple. Dates from 4th century BC. Most of the remains you see at Epidauros today are 4th century BC with some Roman refurbishments.
Hellenistic, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. But the archaeologists have shown that when you get down to the foundations, it goes back earlier than that. And this is a temple. It's reduced to its foundations. Also has kind of a very helpful ramp at the front, and would have housed. We know. I think Pausanias mentions that there's a statue of Asclepius there with his staff and snake, and also his loyal dog at his side.
Interesting.
Yep. And then also a subterranean part of that temple as well, of some kind of strange, mysterious things beneath the floor of the temple, which is also unique. You don't find that aspect in other temples around the Greek world, to my knowledge.
Is there a shrine of Mithras there?
There's no Mithraeum in Epidauros.
Interesting.
Right? You find it like at Eleusis. There's like right outside the gates. There's a Mithraeum, and you find Mithraeums kind of attendant to other shrines. But here, there doesn't seem to be there. I mean, there's a temple to Artemis on site. I think there's some speculation of a temple to Aphrodite.
Yeah.
But no other kind of like cult ritual centers. Right. Yep.
Then the stadium?
The stadium.
Got to mix some sports in with your healing?
Right. So every 4 years, just like the Olympics, they hosted the Asclepia. And so there was athletic games in the stadium. One of the things I love about both the stadium and the theater, of course, the theater is the most famous piece at Epidauros, is how the architects kind of build them right into the landscape, right? And so the stadium is kind of built into that natural bowl.
Yep.
So if you stand on the edge of it, it drops off.
I do remember
right?
it, yeah.
I don't like it that you can't get down
on the other side
there.
of the Tholos.
Right. It had never been allowed down there.
Nope.
But the stadium kind of follows this natural valley on the kind of the southwestern edge of the site.
Right.
Yep. And fascinating there too. We were just talking a couple episodes ago about the Olympics and athletics. Is that this is a rare stadium where we mentioned those turning posts.
Correct. The Meta.
Yeah, the Meta. There's a few of them that survived there at the starting gate at Epidauros. Yeah.
And it dates to the 4th century.
Yes.
Right. So Hellenistic. And the track is quite long here, right?
Yep, about 590 by 69 feet.
Okay,
which is fairly typical. I think that the stadium at Olympia is similar, 600 feet.
Okay,
was the kind of close to a standard length of of a stadium.
Right.
A stadia. Yeah.
So any other important buildings we ought to touch on before we wrap it up here?
Yeah. Just a couple things I'll mention briefly. So there's a couple of buildings there. There's the Hestiatorion, which was a restaurant.
Okay.
And not far from that was the Katagogion, which was a big hotel. Now, both of these have been the ruins. These are not ruins of these are not impressive. They're kind of reduced to the foundations. But the Katagogion is this large 4-square building that seems to have 2 floors, and it's estimated that it had 160 hotel rooms.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. I mean, that's a lot for a hotel today.
Yes, it
right?
is.
And so it could host a massive amount of people. And each quadrant of the building would have been centered around a pool and a fountain. And all of the doors of the hotels would have opened onto kind of a columned hallway that would have either been on the fountain or looking down from a second story.
Nice.
Yes. And we got to talk about the theater, right?
We can't visit Epidauros without talking about the theater.
Right. So if you visit the site today and you walk from the parking lot, you don't enter it like the ancients would have done it. You enter it from the south side of the site. And I think,
so not through the Propylaea.
No. And I think every time I've been there, the first place they take you to is the
Correct.
theater, right? It's right near the parking lot in the museum. And it's the best preserved Greek-style theater really anywhere.
That's right.
And so the times that we've been there, invariably the guide will say, hey, students, go sit anywhere.
Right.
And
then she will pick the acoustic center.
Yes, right in the center of the orchestra.
Talk about all of the acoustic modifications, like the curvature on the back of the seats and below the seats so that the sound is amplified.
Yeah.
And if you speak in a whisper from the acoustic center, you can hear it way up in the nosebleed section.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Before modern acoustic theory or sonic theory, the Greeks figured this stuff out.
Yes, it's perfect engineering.
Right.
Then there's the skene, right, and the backdrop. There's a lot of Roman expansion and building on the wings of this. When I used to teach art and architecture, we would spend quite a bit of time on Epidauros because of all of these really fascinating elements of its construction.
Right. We estimate that you pack it out, you could fit 13 to 14,000 people in there. It's huge.
And the whole place is redolent of pine sol. Right.
Yes, exactly.
It has this beautiful pitch smell because of where it's situated.
Right.
It's really charming.
You walk up to the top band, and it just empties you out into the forest.
That's right.
It's incredible. Right. And so it's a huge theater. They still hold plays and concerts there.
Yes. They have to rebuild part of the stage.
Yes.
Temporary stage.
Yep. The back building is really the piece that does not survive.
Correct.
But everything else is intact and marvelous.
So let's skip the sanctuary of Apollo-Maliatus.
Yep.
Even though we've talked about it a little bit.
Yep.
And Jeff, tell us about the Christian church that was excavated on site.
Right. So as I'm sure many of our audience members are aware, is what often would happen as the Greek and the Roman world becomes Christianized, is a lot of these sacred pagan spots were sanctified by building churches either on top of the remnants of a temple or building a church on site. And that's what we have here. And so there is a 4th or 5th century AD church that was built using stone from the kind of the collapsed and abandoned sanctuary. And
as part of the Roman basilica. Right?
Yes. Yep. And converted into a church dedicated to St. John. And so you can see that it's kind of offset. You kind of have to want to go there. But we've walked back there.
I've wandered up there,
right,
yes. In fact, with a student that I won't name.
Okay.
Because although I like this student, I think the person was a little bit put off by my flippancy.
Oh, I see.
Do you remember this story?
I don't think so.
Well, he had read about it. I had not. So
Okay.
I was glad to follow him to the spot. And we wandered to the spot, and there's a stone cross there, which is original.
Yes.
So that you are in a repurposed basilica, which is now a church.
Yep.
And I guess I was a little put off by the heaviness of the piety, perhaps.
Yes.
Because although I was glad to be there, I didn't have a feeling of reverence, maybe that the other individual wanted me to have. Do you know this experience?
I'm remembering it now.
Yeah, and
yes.
I said something about, could we get some sandwiches? And I think that my irreverence, which wasn't intended toward the Christian faith, but
right.
just, I'm happy to be here, but let's not overdo it.
Gotcha. Yes. Exactly.
I think that put the person off a bit.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah. I remember this story now.
Right.
So just to locate this is where we're kind of back. This is right next to. It's adjacent to the Propylaea. So we're back to kind of the northern edge
on the north
of
side
of the site. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. It's not very well kept.
No, it isn't.
It's overgrown.
But that's true of virtually every Greek archological site.
That's true.
Except the Acropolis.
Yeah, that is very true. Right.
That's my opinion, because the Acropolis brings in so much wealth.
Right.
But so much revenue. But Greece as a whole has more ruins than it knows what to do with.
It's true. Yeah.
Do you remember when we saw the Philip Lion way up north? You've seen that, right?
Yes.
It's just sitting out in the middle of a field,
Right.
really.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. Well, hey, Dave, I think we're up against it.
Yeah, we have to wrap this up, do we not?
Yes, we do. So we got to get out of here, and as always, we got people to thank. We got stuff to talk about, and before we go, Dave, talk to us about if our audience wants to learn Greek or Latin.
Yes. So at the beginning, you heard me read some dactylic hexameter from the Homeric hymn to Asclepius. That takes practice, but it actually isn't all that difficult. It's something that you can learn to do in relatively a short amount of time, and it's fun. So if you'd like to study Greek with me, go to mossmethod.com. I trust you can spell Moss. Check out some of my free offerings online, more than 2,100 now, free Greek and Latin and instructional videos at my YouTube channel. If you want to study Greek, mossmethod.com. As I like to say, there may be better Greek programs out there. I'm very convinced there is not a better value. That is the combination of my expertise and affordability. So please check that out. If you want to study Latin, latinperdiem.com/LLPSI, the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata course by Hans Orberg, sold by Hackett. As it turns out, the book, you can get a good deal on the book. Sign up for one of my courses. I'm teaching other students in a recorded format, so you can watch them. They're entertaining, charming folks, people like Katie and Lauren and Josh and so forth, and Jordan and Kevin, and you can study along with them, not have the same amount of pressure that they're under as I'm teaching them and asking them to answer questions, but you can have a very similar experience at your own pace and affordably. So that's latinperdiem.com.
And for mossmethod.com?
That's correct.
Yes, excellent.
And both come with office hours where you can interact with me directly if you really want to, for up to an hour per week.
Fantastic. Do check those out. And as always, we got to thank Mishka, our wonderful engineer, who turns us around so quickly and makes us sound so nice. Ken Tamplin, Scott Vincent, these great guitarists, musicians who so generously let us use their music.
Absolutely wonderful. So thankful for their generosity. Jeff, if they want to get in touch with you, they want to say, Dr. Winkle, you put that Epidauros episode together brilliantly. That was so interesting. What should they do?
Yeah, or if they just want to say, hey, here's a really horrible classic rock pun I want to share with you. I want to hear it. Yes, they can write to me, Jeff at adnauseum.com. Don't forget that V. And how about if they want to get in touch with you, Dave?
Well, they should write to me at Dave at adnauseum.com. Don't forget that there's a V in the word at nauseum, Navseam. We would absolutely love to hear from you.
Yes.
And you can go to our website, adnauseum.com, click on the shop tab if you want to pick up a t-shirt of some kind, an Ad Nauseam t-shirt or a Quae Nocent, Docent, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger t-shirt or hat, to show people that you are taking in the classics
and keeping them down. And so our merchandise has that wonderful contrast of the orange on the black, which is perfect for October.
That's correct.
Yes, if you want to get yourself a seasonal t-shirt,
that's correct.
Now's the time. Yep.
So Jeff, where are we going next week?
I think we're going to go back to the Richard text. What's the name of that book again?
It is
it's Golden Age of the
Golden Age of the Classics in America.
That's right. Yes. So we're going to pick up another chapter of that as we work through that text. I'm looking forward to that because I've stepped away from it for a while.
Yes.
I really loved the stuff we did.
Be good to get back into it.
Yes.
And I believe, Dr. Winkle, you have the gustatory parting shot.
Yes, this comes from a 17th century English manual called The Interpretation of Dreams, from a section entitled Spells, Charms, and Incantations.
Oh, interesting.
Which is amongst, the context of this is interesting. It's amongst a bunch of love charms, elaborate love charms if you want, as a man, a woman to fall in love with you.
This is what you do.
And in the middle of this, there's this phrase, you may fascinate a woman by giving her a piece of cheese.
So what is it? Is it Velveeta, Swiss, American, Munster? Any further direction?
I'd love to hear from some of our female listeners if they can confirm this.
Yes, or deny
or
it.
deny, right.
You may fascinate a woman by giving her a piece of cheese. That is strange.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.